This year marks the 25th anniversary of Insomniac Games' inception. From Disruptor, to Spyro, to Ratchet and Clank, the Burbank-based developer has built a name for itself in the industry for building quality games and sharing knowledge about game development with the rest of the community. At GamesBeat this week, company founder and CEO Ted Price took the stage to chat with Fireside Games' Webb about the nature of company values and what they mean for companies like Insomniac Games. After Price wrapped up his chat, we were able to sit down with him for a longer conversation for the leadership lessons he's picked up over the last 25 years, discussing everything from his search for functional company values to questions about current and unionization in the game industry. The following QA has been lightly edited for context and clarity. Do you remember what year you started thinking about culture and mission statements? Price: Yeah, I do not remember what year specifically it was, but it was probably around Resistance, the first or second Resistance, when we made the transition from PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3, and also the transition from Ratchet to an N-rated game. We were asking ourselves, what types of games do we make? Given that we are making a more serious, grounded, albeit sci-fi game, what is the message that we have for this game? Are we being consistent with our messaging? We were not trying to answer the question, what is our vision? But it was, are we as a developer, giving to our fans, telling the stories we want to tell, and do those stories make a difference? That was when I think it started bubbling up in a more practical way. At the same time, we were also talking more about values at Insomniac, and what are the values that are important for us to espouse while we are making games at every phase: pre-production, production, post-production. Can we be consistent about how we embrace them at all the phases, so we do not feel schizophrenic? Revisiting your ICE 2014 talk, you talked about employees being afraid of you swooping in and giving conflicting feedback, and needing to step back from roles in that way. What have you learned in the interim about giving feedback as a CEO? Well, the observation was born out of Insomniac's frustrations with me and my tendency to offer unsolicited advice about anything on the games. That outside of learning I had frustrated people. It was horribly inefficient for production, because I often gave conflicting suggestions. Conflicting in the sense that a creative director, a department head, a lad might say one thing, and I might come in and in passing say something else. And then the developer, whether he or she is a programmer, artist, sound engineer, something, goes, who do I listen to? That was an important realization for me to have. Since then, I have tried to distance myself from that aspect of development as much as possible, while still giving feedback that our creative directors on teams can take or leave. Since then, we have developed a more organized approach to giving feedback from other executives and creative directors who are not involved in a project. Almost every week, a bunch of us will play builds of whatever game is in production, and we will share those with everybody. And the creative directors on each project decide how they are going to approach this feedback. Maybe this feedback is irrelevant. Maybe it does not match the feedback for the project. Our goal is to be objective observers and offer a perspective that you do not get if you are working on the game daily. How does it feel, stepping further and further away from game making and having to isolate your feedback like that? I struggled for a while with the challenge of not being as creatively involved as I have been in the past, and what I found filled the gap for me was culture at Insomniac. and thinking more about what makes Insomniac special. Why do people want to come to work at Insomniac? What are we doing that could be improved culture-wise? Asking and trying to answer those questions with other team leadership at Insomniac was as much and more of a challenge as giving creative feedback on the games. I'd also realized that those questions do not have crisp answers ever. There's really not culture. Like a lot of game design decisions, it's not black and white, and it takes listening to people at Insomniac constantly, and asking questions, and allowing people to feel free to speak up about things they may not like to take your culture in a better and better direction. I will give you an example. I do ask me anything every day. I say, send me whatever question you want. It can be a really tough question. It can be something you think I will be embarrassed to answer. I do not care. Send it to me. I will answer it. It's a great way for me to share information about things that people at Insomniac have never seen, shared before at other companies. That's one aspect of trying to create a culture where you can get your answers and have an honest discussion about really difficult topics. Marvel's Spider-Man was the company's physically largest game to date. Now that the dust has settled, what's the big thing you have been thinking about in regards to how big that game got? Did anything notable change that you think has helped the company? Oh yeah, technologically, our core team, which is the team that creates our engine and our tools, made a lot of major advancements in various areas. I mean, a good example is in streaming speed. Having Spider-Man swing through the city at the speed he doesn't load everything in without obvious artifacts. That's a huge testament to our core team, who was able to develop that tech. Our core team worked hand in hand with our environment team, so everything was collaborative in how we could make that work. I will also give a lot of credit to our art teams and our tools team, who focused on more proceduralism in the games. Building a city the size of New York at the level of detail we did with the team would have been very, very difficult without using procedural tools, both external and internal. So a lot of practical improvements to our production processes came about as a result of Spider-Man. At the same time, right now we are going through post-mortems. I would imagine most developers do, given its size and the number of people on it. There were a lot of things that did not go well, and we have to be honest about them. And how are we really changing it? The temptation, I think, for most developers, including us, is to say, yeah, we did not do this well, we are going to fix it, and then, when you get into production on the next game, you revert to old habits, instead of walking the walk, and adhering to what you promised. That's something we have been focusing hard on as a leadership team, is making sure that when we make a commitment to making a material change in our production process, we'll stick with it, and if it's not going well, we can commit to modifying it and changing it. A good example of that is, on all of our new projects, we have committed to getting buy-in from the team on scope, staffing, vision for the game, instead of saying, okay team, here you go, here's the vision for the game, and here's how many people we have, and here's when we are releasing it. We are now discussing this way in advance, and getting the whole team to understand what the vision is and understanding what the scope is, and getting the leadership team to get buy-in from everybody. And then, because things inevitably break during pre-production or production, when we have lost the buy-in, our job is to go back and regain it. Answer the question, okay, we are out of scope, or, okay, this mechanic did not work and we are now behind. How are we going to fix it without going out of scope? Let's everybody discuss solutions and get buy-in the solutions. Is there anything about the setting up process that you think Insomniacs have been right for growing to a Spider-Man-sized team? We have, through the need to grow a team during Spider-Man, realized that our onboarding process could definitely be improved. Improved in terms of simple things. Introducing everybody to each team member. Explaining what that team member does. Helping each team member explain what the production process is for the games.